My sister stole my dream job offer by pretending to be me. When I found out, she laughed and said, "It's not my fault you're so easy to replace." 2 years later, her life fell apart. And I was her last hope. Last night, my sister sat across from me at my small kitchen table, picking at the chipped wood with her thumbnail, eyes red from crying. "I didn't think it would matter this much," Camille said, her voice shaking. "You always had everything figured out." I looked at her, this broken version of the sister who once smiled so smugly as she stole everything I had worked for, and realized I didn't even recognize her anymore. I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina, in a house that always smelled faintly of old pine and my mother's endless supply of lavender candles. My parents, Cynthia and Harold, were proud of their 2 daughters, but in very different ways. Camille was the pretty one. The lively one. The daughter who could make a room light up just by walking into it. I, April, was the quiet one. The planner. The one who stayed late after school working on science fair projects while Camille made the cheer squad. It wasn't resentment, not at first. It was just the way things were. Camille dazzled, I endured. By the time we both ended up at Appalachian State University, the pattern was set. Camille floated through majors, switching whenever something got too hard. I dug into environmental science and never looked back. When senior year came, I hustled. Career fairs, networking events, unpaid internships in the summers. I even commuted back and forth to Charlotte to attend workshops and seminars that could get my foot in the door. And finally, it paid off. After multiple interviews and months of waiting, I landed a dream offer from an environmental consulting firm in Charlotte, one of the most respected in the region. They promised to send the final offer letter via email after my last interview. I was ecstatic. My parents were proud. Camille smiled and congratulated me when I told her. Everything seemed perfect. Then, nothing. Days passed, then a week. I kept refreshing my inbox like a maniac. I called the firm's recruiter, Julia, who told me, somewhat confused, that I had already accepted the offer and she was looking forward to seeing me at onboarding. I didn't understand. I never accepted anything. I hadn't even seen the contract. I racked my brain, trying to figure out what could have happened. And then it hit me, the night before the acceptance deadline, Camille had borrowed my laptop. She said she needed it to apply for jobs because hers was being weird. A deep, horrible sinking feeling started to spread through my gut. I opened my laptop, checked the sent folder, and there it was. An email sent in my name, from my personal email, accepting the job. I barely remember driving to our parents' house. I just remember storming into the living room, where Camille sat curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "Did you send an email from my laptop?" I demanded. Camille blinked at me, then smiled. Smiled. "Relax, April," she said, tossing her phone aside. "It's not my fault you're so easy to replace." I stared at her, stunned silent. My whole body went numb. "You always act like you're better than everyone," she said, her voice light, almost playful. I just leveled the playing field. When I told our parents, they sat me down and said it wasn't worth destroying the family over. They called it a mistake, an act of desperation, and asked me to show grace. Grace. I packed my things that night and moved in with a friend from college in Durham. I cut off contact. I had no job, no plan, just a broken heart and a gnawing sense of betrayal. It took me almost a year to find stable footing again. I found a job, not the prestigious position I had dreamed of, but it paid the bills and allowed me to rebuild. I found a small apartment, adopted a stray cat named Murphy, and slowly, painfully, started to heal. Meanwhile, Camille's life started to crack at the seams. I didn't keep in touch, but word travels fast in a family like ours. Camille struggled from the start. The firm soon realized she lacked the necessary qualifications. She lasted 6 months before they quietly let her go. She tried hopping from one company to another, but her reputation caught up with her. She burned every bridge she touched. By the second year, she was unemployed, in debt, and had been kicked out of her apartment for missing rent. Still, I stayed away. I had built a life without her in it, and for the first time in my life, it felt peaceful. Until 3 nights ago. My phone buzzed late into the evening. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. But then it buzzed again. And again. Finally, against my better judgment, I answered. It was Camille. Her voice was wrecked, like she had been crying for hours. I have nowhere to go, she said. Please, April. I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. I just listened as she sobbed into the phone, begging for help. I should have hung up. Part of me wanted to. But another part, the stubborn part that remembered the good moments we once had as kids, told me to at least hear her out. So I let her come. When Camille showed up at my door, she was almost unrecognizable. Her hair was limp, her clothes rumpled, her eyes hollowed out from lack of sleep and, I suspected, poor nutrition. She didn't bring much. Just a battered duffel bag and a half-eaten granola bar clutched in one hand. I didn't say anything as I led her inside. I heated up some leftover soup and set it in front of her. She ate like she hadn't seen food in days. We didn't talk much that first night. She passed out on my couch before I could even offer her a blanket. The next morning, we sat awkwardly at the kitchen table. Camille fiddled with her spoon, barely meeting my eyes. I didn't think it would matter this much, she mumbled. You always had everything figured out. I thought if I had what you had, I could finally get it right. I said nothing. There was nothing to say that would fix what she had broken. I wasn't trying to hurt you, she said, tears brimming again. I just thought, if you could do it, so could I. There was something achingly pathetic about her now. Not the smug sister who once laughed in my face, but a broken girl who had never learned how to stand on her own. I let her stay, for now. But trust? That's a currency she has long since bankrupted. And part of me wonders if I'm making a huge mistake even letting her back this close again. The days that followed were strained, awkward at best, miserable at worst. Camille tried to pretend like nothing had changed between us, like we were still two sisters sharing inside jokes and childhood memories. But every time she smiled or tried to make small talk, I saw the cracks underneath, the shame she was trying to hide, the desperation. She would leave early in the mornings, claiming to search for jobs, and come back late with no news. Sometimes she didn't come back at all until well after midnight, reeking of cheap beer and stale cigarette smoke. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want the answers. Murphy, my cat, didn't like her. He hissed whenever Camille came too close. Animals have good instincts about people. Sometimes I wished I could trust my gut the way Murphy did. A week into her stay, I came home from work to find Camille sprawled on my couch, scrolling through my laptop, my personal laptop. The same one she had used to steal my job 2 years ago. I stood there in the doorway, frozen. What are you doing? I asked, my voice low, sharper than I intended. She flinched, slamming the laptop closed so hard it rattled the coffee table. Nothing, she said, too quickly. Just, job hunting. I needed to check something. I stared at her, my stomach turning cold. You should have asked, I said. Camille looked at me for a long moment, then dropped her gaze. Sorry, she muttered. That night, I changed all my passwords. Again. I started locking my bedroom door whenever I wasn't home. Camille noticed. She didn't say anything, but I caught her looking at the closed door more than once, her jaw tight, her eyes glinting with something ugly. It was like living with a ghost of all the bad memories I had tried to bury. The final straw came 2 weeks later. I had left a small amount of cash, maybe $60, in my wallet on the kitchen counter. It was grocery money, set aside for Saturday's shopping trip. When I went to grab it, the money was gone. I searched everywhere, even though I already knew. When I confronted Camille, she didn't deny it. I just needed it for gas, she said, her arms crossed, chin tilted up defiantly. I was going to pay you back. You could have asked, I said, failing, to keep my voice steady. You wouldn't have given it to me, she shot back. And maybe she was right. But it didn't matter. Taking it without asking was a betrayal. Another one. A smaller betrayal, maybe, compared to the massive wound from 2 years ago, but betrayals add up. They pile onto each other until you can't see the person standing in front of you anymore. You only see the weight of all the times they chose themselves over you. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just walked away. That night, I sat alone on my bed, staring at the ceiling. Murphy curled against my side, purring softly, a small steady sound in the dark. I thought about all the years Camille had taken, the attention, the praise, the second chances. How she always believed that no matter what she did, someone would catch her when she fell. And now here I was, yet again, being asked to be her safety net. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to drive her to the nearest motel, hand her a 20, and never look back. But another part, the stubborn, hopeful part, wondered if this was the first time in her life she had truly hit bottom. If maybe, just maybe, she could change. I wrestled with it all night. The next morning, Camille sat at the kitchen table again, head bowed, tracing the rim of her coffee mug with one finger. She looked smaller somehow, deflated. I know you're mad, she said quietly. I know I screwed up. Again. I said nothing. I don't have anyone else, April, she said. Her voice cracked at the edges. I don't have mom and dad anymore. They're tired of me too. I blinked, caught off guard. I hadn't realized it had gotten that bad. Our parents cut you off? I asked. She nodded, her mouth a tight line. Mom said they did everything they could. Dad won't even answer my calls. I didn't know what to feel about that. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part, the part that still loved the sister I remembered from childhood, felt a pang of pity. I want to fix it, Camille said, meeting my eyes for the first time in days. I want to be better. I don't know how. There it was again, that flicker of hope. The tiny flame that had gotten me burned so many times before. I stared at her across the table, trying to decide if it was worth it. Could someone like Camille really change? Or was this just another act, another way to cling to me until she found someone else to latch onto? I didn't know. And I hated that I didn't know. I didn't give her an answer right away. Instead, I told her I needed to think. Camille just nodded like she already knew. She stood up slowly and retreated to the couch, pulling the old throw blanket around her shoulders. I watched her for a moment longer than I intended, wondering how the bright, confident girl I once knew had been reduced to this fragile thing afraid to even hope. I spent most of the afternoon outside, wandering through the trails behind my apartment complex. The late autumn air had that sharp, smoky bite, and the leaves crunched under my boots with every step. I needed to clear my head, to think without her desperate eyes boring into me. The memories came whether I wanted them to or not. Camille standing on the sidelines at my high school graduation, clapping just a little too loudly. Camille borrowing my clothes without asking, promising to return them and never doing it. Camille laughing when she stole my dream, like it was a harmless prank. Could someone like that change? Or was this just another performance to wring sympathy out of the last person willing to care? By the time I circled back to the apartment, dusk had fallen. I stood outside for a moment, looking up at the narrow windows glowing softly from the light inside. Part of me wanted to keep walking, to pretend none of this was happening. But I couldn't. Murphy met me at the door, twining around my ankles. Camille was nowhere in sight. I found her in the spare room, curled up on the thin mattress like a child, already asleep, her face pale and exhausted. I pulled the door shut as quietly as I could. The next morning over breakfast, I laid it out plainly. If you want to stay here, I said, there are going to be rules. Camille looked up from her cereal, wary but listening. You find a job. Any job. I don't care if it's flipping burgers or sweeping floors. You contribute to groceries and bills as soon as you can. She nodded slowly, swallowing hard. And you don't touch my stuff without asking. Not my laptop, not my wallet, nothing. Another nod. And if you lie to me about anything, you're out. This time, her mouth tightened. But after a long moment, she nodded again. I get it, she said. Her voice was small but steady. I'll do better. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But trust isn't something you rebuild with promises. It's built brick by painful brick, and it takes time. A lot of time. The first few days were tense. Camille spent hours out of the apartment, supposedly handing out resumes. I didn't check on her, it wasn't my job to babysit her. At night, she came home exhausted, sometimes empty-handed, sometimes a little more hopeful. One afternoon, about 2 weeks later, she came through the door with a crumpled paper in her hand and a shy, uncertain smile. I got hired, she said. Server at a diner down the road. It's not much, but it's something. I nodded, forcing myself not to react too much. I didn't want her to think a single good act would erase everything. Good, I said simply. She seemed almost relieved by my lack of celebration, like she had expected some huge emotional response she wasn't ready to handle. The job wasn't glamorous. The hours were long, the pay was barely minimum wage, and she came home smelling like fryer oil and desperation. But she stuck with it. Day after day. Week after week. Small changes started to happen. She stopped asking for money. She bought a few groceries without being told. She even started helping with the cleaning without acting like it was some huge favor. Little things. But they mattered. One night, late in December, I found Camille sitting on the couch with a notebook open on her lap, frowning in concentration. Curious, I glanced over her shoulder. It was a budget, a real, actual budget, scribbled out in messy handwriting. Income estimates, expenses, savings goals. Camille caught me looking and flushed, slamming the notebook shut. I'm just trying to get it together, she muttered. I nodded and didn't push. But inside, something knotted in my chest just a little. Christmas came and went quietly. I didn't go back to Asheville. I hadn't spent a holiday with my parents since the fallout, and I wasn't about to start now. Camille didn't go either. She didn't even call them. We stayed in, made cheap spaghetti, and watched old movies while Murphy dozed between us on the couch. It was almost normal. Almost. But trust, real trust, was still missing. It was like there was a wall between us, invisible, but thick, and every conversation skirted around it carefully. Neither of us dared to touch it. The new year rolled in, cold and gray. Camille kept working, saving little by little. I saw her stashing tips in a battered jar she kept hidden in the back of her closet. I never commented on it. By February, she started looking for a second job, something better than the diner. I helped her clean up her resume, the real one this time, and walked her through practice interviews at the kitchen table. Sometimes, late at night, when the apartment was silent and Murphy was curled at my feet, I wondered if I was being a fool all over again. If I was setting myself up for another betrayal. Because Camille could fake sincerity better than anyone I knew. But there was something different now. A slowness. A weariness. Like the easy tricks didn't work anymore and she knew it. One night, after a particularly long day, Camille sat across from me at the table, twisting her fingers together. April, she said, voice so low I barely heard her. Do you ever think about who we could have been if we hadn't screwed everything up? I looked at her for a long time. I thought about the years of resentment, the betrayal, the nights spent crying into my pillow wondering why I wasn't enough for my own family. I thought about the sister I lost, and the stranger who took her place. I think about it, I said. But it doesn't change anything. Camille nodded slowly, like she already knew the answer before she asked. Neither of us spoke for a long time after that. We just sat there in the dim kitchen, the sound of Murphy's soft breathing the only noise between us. Some things could be repaired. Some things couldn't. I didn't know yet which one we were. Spring crept into Durham slowly that year, reluctant and gray. Camille's life was holding together by threads, but it was holding. She was working 2 jobs now, one at the diner, one at a local print shop. She was even talking about saving up for her own place. For the first time in a long time, I started to think, maybe she had changed. But deep down, I still guarded myself. People don't flip who they are overnight. And Camille had decades of practice getting what she wanted, whatever it cost. That old fear proved right sooner than I wished. One Friday evening, I came home late from work. The apartment was quiet. Murphy greeted me at the door, but Camille was nowhere in sight. I didn't think much of it until I saw my laptop sitting open on the couch. Again. My stomach twisted. I crossed the room, heart hammering, and stared at the screen. An email account was open, Camille's. She must have forgotten to log out. I didn't mean to snoop. I truly didn't. But when I glanced down, a subject line caught my eye, excited to join your team. My throat closed. I clicked. It was an email from Camille, pretending to be me again. Using my resume, my references, even tweaking the details to make herself look better. She had applied to a prestigious nonprofit environmental organization. One I had connections with. One I had dreamed of working with years ago, before she destroyed my reputation. And she had an interview scheduled. In 2 days. She was going to try it again. I stood there for a long time, staring at the glowing screen, feeling a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and bitter disappointment swirling inside me. After everything, after all the second chances. She was still the same. The next morning, I waited. I said nothing about what I saw. Instead, I let her wake up, make coffee, talk casually about her big opportunities coming up, smiling that same sly smile she always did when she thought she was getting away with something. I nodded, polite. Calm. Inside, I was making plans. Sunday morning arrived. Camille dressed up, borrowing one of my old blazers without asking, of course. She left the apartment humming to herself. She thought she had won again. Thought she had played me like a fool one more time. But what she didn't know was that while she was getting ready, I had sent a few emails of my own. I had reached out to an old friend from university, Miranda, who now worked in HR at the nonprofit Camille was trying to scam her way into. I told Miranda the full story. No embellishments. No drama. Just facts. The fraudulent job acceptance years ago. The theft of my identity. The betrayal I had never truly recovered from. I sent proof, the fake emails, the old laptop screenshots I had kept all this time, tucked away in a forgotten folder out of some stubborn refusal to let it all go. I told Miranda I wasn't looking to hurt anyone. I just thought they deserved to know who they were dealing with before offering her a key to their organization. Miranda replied within the hour. Thank you, April. We'll handle it. When Camille returned that afternoon, her entire posture had changed. She slumped through the door, tossed her purse onto the counter, and stood in the middle of the kitchen like she had forgotten how to move. She didn't say anything. I didn't ask. But later, when she thought I wasn't listening, I heard her in her room, muffling sobs into her pillow. She had been exposed. The nonprofit had called her out during the interview, confronted her with the evidence. They had notified local networks and flagged her name internally to avoid any future scams. Word would spread, quiet but efficient. She would never get her foot into that world again. Not under my name. Not under anyone's. I didn't feel good about it. But I didn't feel bad either. I felt free. Over the next week, Camille barely spoke. She shuffled through the apartment like a ghost, avoiding my eyes, barely eating, barely sleeping. I gave her time. I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. The final blow didn't need fireworks or screaming matches. The truth was enough. One evening, while I was feeding Murphy, Camille finally came into the kitchen. "I'll be gone by the end of the week," she said. Her voice was flat, mechanical. I nodded. Nothing more needed to be said. True to her word, by Friday, she packed up her things. A single suitcase and that battered duffel bag she had arrived with months ago. At the door, she paused. For a second, I thought she might say something, apologize, beg, accuse. But she just looked at me, a flicker of something, regret, maybe, crossing her face. "Goodbye, April," she said. Then she was gone. The apartment felt bigger after she left. Cleaner. Lighter. Murphy settled into my lap that evening, purring like a tiny motorboat as I sat on the couch, staring at the quiet, peaceful room. I had finally let go of the hope that Camille would be the sister I needed her to be. And somehow, it felt like a victory. Not because I had crushed her. Not because I had punished her. But because I had protected myself, and refused to be used again. That was the real revenge. Living a good life she could no longer steal.